Hi, Rowan and Ryan, Marines and sailors and soldiers, airmen, and even coasties. Welcome to Facing Harm's Way. Tonight we're going to read again out of George Kosmacki's book, D-Day with the Screaming Eagles. And tonight we're going to read about the 506. 506 Regiment was the regiment that Band of Brothers was from. They were Easy Company 506, 101st. So, and this is and what's really funny about this particular story is that it shows the confusion, and it also shows sort of how they got their resources, how they figured out where they were on D-Day. So I'm going to pick it up right here. The 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment, PIR, Parachute Infantry Regiment, was commanded by the legendary Colonel Robert F. Sink, who popularized the term hostiles when speaking of the enemy. The assignment of the 506 included the capture of Causeways 1 and 2, the lower exits from Utah Beach. Utah Beach was on the north, so it was Utah, and then Omaha, and then Sword, Juneau, and Gold, I think is how those other ones went. But Utah was the furthest north and the furthest out on the peninsula. And there was a river that ran in between Utah and Omaha, and that's where the causeway was. The lower exit from Utah Beach. Blocking the enemy routes to these exits at Sainte Marie de Mont and Villerville. Sainte Marie de Mont and Villerville, and capture two of the wooden bridges over the Devoe River, 2 miles northeast of Carentan. Bridgeheads were to be established to the east of the bridges. All right. As was the case in the other regiments, communication with the division units was nil. Every radio operator belonging to the regimental headquarters was missing, as was almost the entire communication platoon, whose drop had occurred 22 miles to the north near Cherbourg. 22 miles out. They goofed up. Many were not located, and this kind of tells you what was going on. Many were not located until their marked graves were found weeks later. Some were found as German prisoners in the hospitals of Cherbourg when the city was finally captured. It was a small wonder that Colonel Sink was left in the dark for much of D-Day as to the whereabouts of his fighting force. Part of the 1st Battalion landed just north of Hesterville, near the position of Colonel Sink, the regimental commander. After he had spent considerable time fighting his way out of a too tightly buckled parachute harness, somehow he's cranking it down, fighting his way out of a too tightly buckled parachute harness, Sink prowled the hedgerows until he came upon a member of his regimental group, Lieutenant Sam Burns, who was incapacitated with a broken leg. Looking for a place of concealment for the handicapped officer, Sink spotted a hole dug in an orchard into which farmers place apples for storage over the winter. Now the hole provided an ideal hiding place. He assisted the officer into the hole and covered him with leaves and twigs. He would send medical aid later. As almost everyone was doing, Sink followed the hedgerows. However, after about 400 yards, he realized a blacktop road ran beside the hedgerow embankment. Moving on to the road, he came to an intersection where he met 4 members of his group trying to determine their position. So 4 lost GIs. A dog, attracted by the sound of their voices, began barking loudly near a small farmhouse. Colonel Sink went to the door and banged on it, yelling, "Vermeer la porta," several times. One of his junior officers reminded him his pidgin French, and so the junior officer reminds him that his pidgin French was rusty because he was actually shouting, "Shut the door." A Frenchman appeared at a window. Using some of the phrases the men had practiced, Sink announced in French that the Allies had come. After excitingly slamming the window, the Frenchman quickly appeared at the door. The colonel unfolded a map of the area and asked about the enemy. With wild arm gestures, the French farmer related that the Germans were all around, particularly near Saint-Côme-du-Mont to the southwest. Noting their position on the map, the group realized they were only a few hundred yards from the site chosen for the regimental CP. They started in that direction and picked up 4 more jumpers. Arriving at the spot, they noted that no one had preceded them. The junior members of the party were sent off in different directions to bring any nearby paratroopers. In the area where most of the 2,000-man regiment was to have been dropped, only 41 men out of 2,000 were located within a 2-hour area. So that kind of tells you how crazy it was. Only 41 guys out of 2,000 were anywhere in the area. And where, you know, and then they had to, I mean, they still were digging them out. So D-Day was a chaotic mess, and it's worth talking about because that chaos really did support and make it easier for the Allied forces to take over. I mean, because the Germans couldn't believe it, basically, is what was happening at that time. So we're going to read more about this book. I like this book a lot. This book talks a lot about personal stories. So Koska Mäki has interviewed all of these veterans, and he wrote it all down, and he's got several other books, so I'm kind of excited about reading him. So if you like what you heard and saw, please subscribe, and I'll talk to you later.